4, Devon Storm, just chatting about, among other things, Ted Petty working on the independent scene and WATNA, what he's been up to, life in WCW. You can talk to him as well. You can join us at 1-800-878-PLAY, although all our lines are taken right now. But when someone hangs up, you can hop on. Brian, how are you tonight? Brian is... Brian! I don't hear Brian.
Can you hear me?
Now I hear you fine.
Oh, I didn't hear you.
Oh, okay.
Here we go.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing good.
That's good. We weren't here last week, so we didn't get a chance to talk about Unforgiven and the finish of Unforgiven, which has gotten a lot of people irate. And it's, I guess, I learned a lot watching that watching that show and the reaction to that show because a week before the show, when I was trying to figure out exactly where WWE was going and kind of having a clue and kind of realizing that they don't know where they're going and that the next pay-per-view is also going to be headlined by Undertaker and Brock Lesnar, that they probably shouldn't do a pinfall because they have to come back with the same match. Now, I would not have recommended doing what, but that was a total Japanese crowd saying, you can't be doing that stuff to us.
Well, I mean, I think it was, to me, like, doing something like that on free TV is one thing, but when I pay $35 to watch a pay-per-view and they give me a finish like that, that is something completely different. And, obviously, actually, I can't even say that they couldn't have done a clean pinfall because, maybe they could have done, not a clean pinfall.
Not a clean pinfall, done.
They could have done something where they had to come back with some kind of stipulation match or something like that, but to give a non-finish, especially in the main event of a show like that, was real bad.
Yeah, now, this was really an interesting week for the company because...
Actually, fantasy booking.
Okay.
And I know Hunter would not have gone along with this. If I had to do that, I would have done that stupid finish in the middle of the show and then put Hunter and Rob Van Dam in the main event and given Van Dam the belt. Even if it was for a month,
Or for a week.
Or a week, or a day.
That's all it was supposed to be originally.
Yep.
Yeah, that's, the political forces were at work and everybody saw it, and I think a lot of people really resent it. And it was an interesting week for the WWE, and we'll talk more about it when we come back, because Raw was not very good, and SmackDown was awesome. I mean, it was one of the best TV shows of the year, and Eddie Guerrero and Edge match just off the charts. Anyway, we'll be back talking more about that. You're listening to Wrestling Observer Live on Sports Byline USA Radio Network. Okay, welcome back to the show. I'm Dave Meltzer, editor of the Wrestling Observer newsletter with Brian Alvarez of Figure 4 Weekly. We're here for Wrestling Observer Live 2 hours every Sunday night here on Sports Byline USA. And the mythical title, actually it's not mythical, it's real. The real title of the greatest wrestler in the world shifted from Kurt Angle to Eddie Guerrero sometime on Tuesday night, and Thursday night we all watched it. Brian, what do you think about that?
I thought that was a tremendous match. And, the whole show, they ended it with the three-way with Benoit, Angle, and Ray, and top to bottom, I think that might have been actually the greatest SmackDown ever, not just this year.
Awesome show. I loved that show because of those two matches, but just the whole that. And coming off of, it's becoming a pattern. Raw has been so disappointing. And, there's reasons SmackDown should always be better than, first of all, they got way better wrestlers. Second of all, they got a way better writer. And also, when there's mistakes in SmackDown, you should never see them because they got 2 days to clean.
Unless they involve Bob Holly and Brock Lesnar. In which case, everybody should see them.
Everyone did see those. That's true. But,
that thing is just the morale between the two shows. If you talk to people that have been to Raw and SmackDown, they'll tell you that the people at Raw are just depressed and sad, and then you go to SmackDown and they have like a training session in the afternoon from like 2 to 5 in the ring, and it's just packed and everybody's happy and just
what? That's how I feel every Monday night at it usually is about 8:30 to 9:30 to 9:45 Eastern time. When they're about the 30-minute mark after hearing one 20-minute interview and a couple of bad matches, and it's like, oh God, not again.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's the same formula every Monday night. And I was just looking at the ratings pattern, and all the fans have figured it out.
Oh, they turn it off usually between an hour and hour 15 in.
Yeah, or it's like they know they don't have to watch the first part. Then they know there's the main event at the top of the hour that's usually better than the main event at the end.
Yeah, well they didn't even watch that this week.
Well, that's true. And then there's that part from about 10:30 to 10:45. They know that nothing ever happened. They know that they can just watch that and not the main event, and they'll know what happened.
Yeah, but people aren't even turning in for the for the overruns that much anymore. I mean, a little bit, but not like in the past.
Yeah.
Also, Friday night was UFC. What were your thoughts on UFC?
I thought it was kind of a disappointing show until the main event. And, the main event, it had Rico Rodriguez in there. And I was one of those people that I wanted nothing more in this world than for him to be beaten very badly. And it was just because of that day that he did commentary on that UFC pay-per-view.
If you saw him do other interviews, you'd seen the same thing.
Yes, he annoyed me so much, and I was so sad with the title. But then on the way home, I thought, this guy, he annoyed me because he said he was so great and he'd win the belt. But you know what? He beat Randy.
You know what else?
Begrudgingly, I have nothing more in this world than for him to be beaten very badly. And it was just because of that day that he did commentary on that UFC pay-per-view.
If you saw him do other interviews, you'd seen the same thing.
Yes, he annoyed me so much, and I was so sad with the title. But then on the way home, I thought, this guy, he annoyed me because he said he was so great and he'd win the belt. But you know what? He beat Randy.
You know what else?
Begrudgingly, I have to give him credit for being a hell of a fighter.
One of the things, and it has to do with Rico Rodriguez and also Phil Baroni. Both those guys, they trained so hard. I mean, Phil Baroni.
He had to be locked out.
What?
He had to be locked out.
They had to lock him out of the gym. And, I mean, look at what this guy looks like. I mean, you can talk steroids, and I'm not saying that he does or he doesn't, and, certainly with his bodybuilding background. But the thing is that to look like that, I mean, there are a million guys on steroids, and they don't look like that. I mean, he is a trained, you know what I mean? Just a trained, awesome athlete.
Yeah.
And devastating puncher and everything. And, I mean, he looked great. A knockout of Dave Manet, who's a real fighter. I mean, and a good fighter. Former world champion in that weight. And I just give that, you got to give him credit. And, I mean, Phil Baroni, the one thing about, you and I, we always talk about with the Pride and where Pride is superior to UFC is that, the professional wrestling part of it. And the thing with most of the UFC fighters, like Randy Couture and these guys, is that they're not professional wrestling fans. I mean, Randy Couture is like a great guy. I mean, he was a military guy, and he was a great amateur wrestler, tried for the Olympics a couple of times, and great athlete, trains really hard in great condition, but not particularly colorful. Phil Baroni is a guy from New York who grew up watching Roddy Piper and Paul Orndorff and Rick Rude as he was growing up, and he understands, okay, I'm out there playing bad guy wrestler, and people hate him, and he actually gets mad at the fact that people hate him when he does these heel tactics. But the thing is, he's colorful, he's controversial, and that's the kind of guy that they need to build their company around. I
mean, it's just like we talked about it with Takayama, who never wins, but is so over. And I was just looking at this show, and, they had the big fat guy Cabbage, who was the most horrible fighter in the world, no defense, and he just sat there and got punched for 2 straight rounds.
Yeah, but he got over.
Yeah, he got more over than B.J. Penn, who won his boring fight.
Yeah, poor. That fight was the big disappointment of the show.
Yeah.
So, anything else you want to add as far as the Unforgiven pay-per-view, like the Benoit Angle match or anything?
I thought it was you saw the match the night before, and
yeah, the match the night before was almost as good.
I heard they hated that one.
Well, the crowd wasn't into it. I mean, that was the problem. I mean, but I'm watching it, and I put it up on the website right afterwards. You're gonna see a great match on pay-per-view. I mean, it was move for move until the finish. Until the last 2 minutes, the same match, and then the last 2 minutes they did a bunch of new stuff. Mm-hmm. But excellent match there. We're gonna start. We're gonna go to let's see. I guess we will start with John in Chicago. John, what's going on?
Yeah, how you doing, guys?
Doing really good.
I'm just that pay-per-view on Sunday. It was just really. My friends and I were just really pissed.
But you know what?
It's not just the ending.
Okay, but the thing is to me, I mean, up until the ending of the main event, I thought it was a darn good show.
Well, it was. That's the problem, because you remember, all my friends, it was the same way. I mean, when that main event was over, it was so bad that they all said, this was the worst show ever.
It wasn't. I mean,
because they forgot about everything else because the main event was so bad.
I mean, you had...
The last thing you remember is the ending. If it's a bad ending,
Well, at least they didn't put them in a car and drop them from 40 feet and have them come back without a scratch.
Yeah, but even that was... Well, wait, was that the main event?
That was the main event with Austin and Hunter, which was the last...
Yeah, but the bad guy got killed in a car accident, supposedly.
But still, that was terrible. That was terrible, though.
But I go DQ type finish like that and still get your money's worth. I go back to Angle versus Austin last at SummerSlam.
Oh, I hated
Even
that.
though that was a DQ finish, I felt I got my money's worth, you know?
Yeah, I think that too many people went in there with the idea that Lesnar had to beat Undertaker, and in a perfect world he would. But when you're building up for a rematch, I mean that's the problem of having these split brands and having no depth and not having made any stars.
But you know, Dave, I wasn't even worried about getting a. You know, I was kind of thinking, okay, maybe they could continue the feud, but he didn't even make him look strong, and he didn't look like.
I know.
Taker really did not.
No, Undertaker. But okay, Undertaker did. You know what's funny is I'm watching this, I'm going like, Undertaker does need to look strong because he's... And then when that thing was over, I'm going like, that guy was so selfish. And, I mean, everyone knew it after the show, too. I mean, he lost a lot of respect.
You know what, Dave? This is the thing, the one good thing about this, at least for me, as far as them going down, their stock dropping and they're going out of favor with fans and the mainstream, is that it destroys this goddamn myth that lots of friends of mine have, a lot of fans have, that for some reason that Triple H and Undertaker are in the same league as Austin, Rock, the Hogans, or even Foley. Because these guys cannot sell, pay-per-views or house shows based on their personality.
Okay, okay. I think if Foley was around in his prime now, he would be struggling too. But, no, Undertaker and Hunter, as drawing cards, no, they are not in the league with Hogan, Rock, and Austin. Although when Rock was around, they were still struggling.
Push them like that.
Okay, and I know. And if Austin were to come back, I mean, Austin's not going to be the cure-all. I mean, it'll help, but it won't.
That's true. I just find it funny now for all the people who are kissing Vince's ass, Triple H's ass, and there's a lot of people here in Chicago who do that on our.
I think a lot of people are starting to see through Triple H, and I mean,
and I'm so
and Vince.
Wow, on that guy.
And Vince. I mean, the thing with Vince is, Vince is a great promoter,
right?
And there's no taking that away from him. And as far as creative goes, but the last 18 months have not been a lot. He hasn't shown that a lot.
But you know what? My last point, real quick, Dave, is just that. People always say, "Oh, we can't give Jericho or Angle or Benoit the ball because they're not up to the league of Triple H."
You make them up to the league. You create him. Triple H wasn't up to that league either, and he was a very successful character when he had other people to play off of.
Yeah, and
they dropped the ball. They dropped the ball on those guys. And poor Jericho on Raw, he's dying on that show.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just very sad to see.
Well, I heard on the internet he's already resigned to his fate. He's just like, well, I'm just going to try to get other people over.
Yeah.
And he was saying the internet buzz and everything like that about me being held down is untrue. Well,
you have to say that. I mean, you work for that company.
True.
I mean, what are you going to do? Go on there and just go, the internet's right and our writing staff is wrong. And
I hate the show that I'm on.
Well, I thought it was funny when Hurricane said the same thing on Bite This.
What did he say? Because I didn't.
He said that all the internet speculation that there's trouble in the locker room is wrong. Everybody in the locker room gets along with everyone.
Well, they get along in the locker room. They really do. But there's nothing that we say that, put it this way, we're not told by wrestlers.
Right.
That the wrestlers themselves aren't saying, put it that way. Anyway, we got to go ahead to a break right now. We're going to get to as many calls as possible. We'll be back right after this. You're listening to the Wrestling Observer Live on the Sports Byline USA Radio Network.
I want you to listen to Byline Radio Network, the Wrestling Observer. If you smile like the brain, you'll do it.
Welcome back to the show, and that was actually Bobby Heenan from a couple of weeks ago. And anyway, for those of you interested in Wrestling Observer newsletter or Figure 4 Weekly, go to www.wrestlingobserver.com, and in the features section, there's actually previews of the newest issue of both publications and subscription information as well. I do Wrestling Observer newsletter every week. More news and inside info than any other source in pro wrestling. Swear to God. And Figure 4 Weekly, Brian does it every week, and tremendous read. It's definitely one of the highlights of my week is reading Figure 4. It is the highlight of my week, some weeks. Anyway, we're going to go to Ed in San Antonio. Ed, what's going on?
Hey, guys. What I'd like to talk about is I want to talk about my favorite wrestler, and that's Eddie Guerrero.
Yeah?
And I think this past week or two he's made a case for him to be called maybe the best worker in North America, if not the world, the way he's been performing. And
I can't argue that.
Every week it switches off him, Benoit, and Angle.
I had Angle for a while there. But but I would say in the last week I would go with Guerrero. But you know what? I mean, on that pay-per-view, Benoit and Angle, that to me was better than Guerrero and Edge, but the Guerrero Edge match on Thursday was, a really unique, tremendous match.
Yeah, and then with him being sick and all, that had stuff.
Yeah.
Considering the way that the crowd was reacting to him at the end of the match, what's Paulie's plan to take him? Is he going to take him face? Is he going to keep him heel? I mean, what are you hearing?
I don't think, the crowd turned him face. I don't know that they want to do that, because I kind of get the impression, well, I don't know.
Well, a major part of it, too, is where they were at.
Yeah. I mean, in Los Angeles and San Diego, he was going to get more cheers. But with that performance and the facials that he did afterwards that they focused on, he was going to get a standing ovation from pretty much any crowd, I think, anyway.
Yeah.
After that match. Because he was, the way that he was doing those facials, that was sort of a semis turn. I mean, they're going to be really focusing on the tag team division in SmackDown. And, him and Chavo, I think, may be the team. Because everyone's real impressed by them. I mean, I saw them at the house show last Saturday in San Jose, and I mean, they got so much chemistry. I mean, Eddie's the great worker and all, but those guys together, I mean, they really have something as a team. And, I know there's a lot of talk of putting Benoit and Kurt Angle as a team. There's some matches there, There's some matches there. Oh, my God.
Phenomenal. And it's amazing. What's really amazing is, I remember about maybe a year and a half ago talking to you, and we were talking about just to see if Eddie was going to be able to kick his drug problem, and then here he is about a year and a half later talking about him being the best worker in the world.
Hey, there are success stories and there are non-success stories when it comes to this stuff. But the thing with Eddie Guerrero, which was different from Scott Hall, okay? When Scott Hall was gone for all that time, I got nothing. I got pretty much a lot of bad reports on Scott Hall, and even if you didn't get bad reports on him, you could watch his matches in New Japan. I mean, he was not good. Eddie Guerrero, every independent show that he worked, all we heard was he's straight. Guys ask him to go out drinking, he won't do it. And more importantly, his matches are great. And to me, it's like a guy. If you go on the independent scene and you don't get a bad rep and you're working hard and having great matches, to me, that's a good indicator that, you probably should take a guy like that back, or at least basically back by having the match with Benoit. You know what I mean? I mean, he earned his spot back on the main roster. Whereas Scott Hall, he was giving it back because Vince, wanted to believe something that, was a fantasy.
Uh-huh.
So anyway, wanted to say that.
And if I could just ask one more little thing about Eddie Guerrero. I was reading on this website about a fight between him and Road Warrior Hawk, and I was wondering if you could explain to me what happened.
God, that one was my fault. They were in Japan, and Eddie Guerrero was talking to Hawk, and I don't know how, what exactly happened, and they, but Eddie made a mention that, him and Art Barr, him and Love Machine tag team in the world, which is at a time when they were the best tag team in the world. Yeah. And then Hawk goes, you mean best junior heavyweight tag team in the world? Because I think Hawk believed that stuff. You know what I mean? The Road Warriors. And he just goes, well, it said in the Wrestling Observer, and I think right when he said Observer, Hawk threw a sucker punch and knocked him out. So that was the fight.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty bad. There was a lot of incidents with Hawk. I mean, that's there were a lot of incidences in Japan with Hawk, and Scorpio once knocked him out, and he sucker punched Savage, and over in Japan, I mean, Hawk was a really wild, scary guy, believe me. I used to be in Japan when he didn't like me, and it was like, in the States it'd be one thing, but in Japan it's like, he'll hit you, you know what I mean? It's like, oh my God. That's just an example of what steroids can do to a person.
To a really, really aggressive person, yes. A lot of guys on steroids that wouldn't do that. So you don't just blame the steroids, but it doesn't help, yeah.
Okay, guys, well, thanks for the call, and one last thing, I just want to send out my condolences to the family of Rocco Rock. I was never really a fan of Public Enemy, but I did like him because you could just see that love for wrestling that he had. He was
a fun guy in interviews, and Paul Heyman did a great job with him, and boy, I was at ECW Arena only a couple of times when Public Enemy was in its heyday, and it was really quite a thing. I saw I think it was a barbed wire match with the Funks, and but Rocco Rock, I met him a couple times in Japan and stuff, and other places, and very, very nice man. And I was more than most because like we talk about, Brian, he's a fun guy in interviews, and Paul Heyman did a great job with him, and
Well, I was at DCW Arena only a couple of times when Public Enemy was in its heyday, and it was really quite a thing. I saw I think it was a barbed wire match with the Funks, and but Rocco Rock, I met him a couple of times in Japan and stuff, and other places, and very, very nice man, and I was more than most because like we talk about, Brian, is so many of the deaths in wrestling. I'm sad at all of them, but you can sort of see them coming. In this one, even though he was an older guy, it's like, he was in shape and he was a great athlete that a lot of people didn't know. And just a real sad situation.
Yeah, it's just, but thanks for taking my call, guys.
Okay, very welcome. We're going to go to Derek in Salisbury, Massachusetts, or Maryland, Salisbury somewhere.
Hey, Dave. My question, I actually have a couple of questions. First off is, in Major League Wrestling on Thursday night, Dick Togo injured his ankle somehow. Do you have any update on that at all?
I heard it was taking the Spanish Fly, and I heard that it was a sprain and probably not a break, although that was a preliminary diagnosis.
Okay, because I hadn't read anything online about it since Thursday night.
Yeah, but the injury was legit, yeah.
Yeah. Second question. Recently in the past couple of months, including Major League Wrestling, I've seen a lot of Japanese workers come over to America, like Misawa and Yoshinari Ogawa, and et cetera. What do you think this will have for the impact of Japanese wrestling in the United States?
Nothing, because it's not on big-time TV. It's just, I saw Misawa and Ogawa when they wrestled here in Fairfield, and, it was nice for Japanese television, although, my God, the production values were horrendous when I actually saw that thing. But, no, it doesn't mean anything, because unless WWE TV, I don't think that it really seeps the consciousness of most wrestling fans.
And the thing is, today, with a lot of these shows, there's so many hardcore fans that show up that people will recognize, but anybody else who saw them wouldn't. But
the problem with all of that, and what was interesting to me, because I saw Misawa, and of the people that were there, he got a fantastic reaction. They reacted to him like he was The Rock, and I heard that Kojima got the same sort of reaction in New York on Thursday. So those people who were there, really respect the Japanese, and those two guys deserve respect. At the same time, it's not that many people. They brought in New York City, which has how many million people, and they brought in, look at the talent that they brought in on that card, with Terry Funk and Sabu and Kojima and Jerry Lynn, and, Loki was supposed to be there, although he wasn't, and, Ikuto Hidaka and all these guys. And you're talking about, somewhere between, depending on who you believe, 400 and 700 people, it's just not that many people.
Oh, you're 100% correct. I just brought that question up because I know Jim Ross said something in the Roach Report about working with Ultimo Dragon next year.
Ultimo Dragon was at the TV and at the pay-per-view, and they spoke about possibly, him possibly wrestling next year, yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, guys, for taking my call, and thanks for answering my questions.
Okay, you're very welcome. Let's go to Michael in Meadville, Pennsylvania. Mike, what's going on?
Not too much. What's cracking with you guys?
Yeah, not too much.
Recently there's been a lot of talk about Vince McMahon, quote-unquote, losing it. And while I agree, as, he thinks Stephanie's a great character and Billy and Chuck superstars, the one thing I think he does finally realize is that Steve Austin is the guy, and they make that sacrifice to get him back.
Yeah, why'd they show that thing again last night?
Well, that's why.
To set people up for his return?
If you really
I guess.
Look at,
yeah, I guess.
Maybe he's not coming back. That's what they're hoping for. But if you look at Confidential and what happens after these shows air, it's always something having to do with that show. So
true.
I don't think. And besides, I think that's the third time now that they've repeated that episode. So.
Well, everyone thinks it's an angle already, so this kind of just cements it.
It certainly wasn't an angle when it happened.
Well, we all know that, but when they replay it 3 times on Confidential,
first time that it really was an angle. As far as we'll find out if the guy shows up in the next 2 or 3 weeks, because if he doesn't show up in the next 2 or 3 weeks, then they just did it because God only knows why. They just thought it was a good show for ratings because it was, with the Heenan and everything like that. It was good. A show people would want to see, and it saves them the production cost of doing a new show when they don't have any material anyway. After that show the week before with Rene Dupree, which it wasn't a bad segment, but it was like I could just hear between the Rene Dupree segment and the Blassie segment. Holmes clicking off, and they did.
Yeah.
Anything else, Mike?
Yeah, I had a question about Juventud Guerrera.
Yeah.
He got a tryout this week.
Yep.
And I assume he tore the house down and was reprimanded for working hard.
Yeah, well, they told him going in what to do, and he didn't do what they told him. So, that's part of the problem. If they hadn't have told him, I think they would have taken it a lot better.
really.
Yeah. But, Mike, we've got to head out to a break. I want to thank you very much for calling. We'll be back right after this. You're listening to the Wrestling Observer Live on the Sports Byline USA Radio Network. Okay, welcome back to the show. I'm Dave Meltzer, editor of the Wrestling Observer Newsletter with Brian Alvarez of Figure 4 Weekly. By the way, in our second hour, we'll be talking about Ted Petty, who we just talked about in our last segment. We're going to have Devon Storm on, who grew up. Actually, I think one of the first matches he ever saw Ted Petty was in, and we'll talk about that. And he was in Ted Petty's last match, last Saturday night, Ted Petty passing away of a heart attack last Saturday night while going from Jersey to Philadelphia on the Turnpike. And very sad story at the age of either 49 or 50. By the way, do you know which one he was, Brian?
I just heard 49, so.
I mean, the birthday I had was 49, but every friend of his was telling me he was really 50, so.
Yeah.
We have a real good obit in this week's Observer on Ted Petty, by the way. I worked pretty hard on that one. So, anyway, if you're interested. We are going to go to Jonathan in Savannah, Georgia. Jonathan, what's going on?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Not too much. What's happening?
Not much. I had 2 questions for you. They're kind of opinion questions, but my first one was, do you think with the way, I agree with you totally on how Raw has been, it's been pretty bad lately. SmackDown has been this far superior show in terms of, like, actual...
Everything.
Yeah. Except, like, ratings-wise, I guess, but...
No, the ratings are better on SmackDown for once. You know, Raw was doing better ratings for a long time, but now SmackDown's, I mean... When you see the numbers, okay, like SmackDown did a 3.6 this week, and Raw did 6 this week, so some people will go, that's even, but it's not even, because the way the ratings work for national ratings, Raw did 3.6% of the people who could see Raw, okay, of the homes that have TNN.
Yeah.
SmackDown did 3.6% of the homes in the United States, many of whom do not have UPN. It actually did about 4.1% of the homes that have UPN, so than TNN, although statistically that's really shouldn't matter anyway. Yeah. But the point is that on a percentage basis, on a realistic rating basis, SmackDown's been ahead of Raw just about every week.
Okay. My question for you is, you and Brian, do you think with the way since SmackDown's been better, that they would allow Heyman, and I assume that it's primarily Heyman writing?
Heyman, Michael Hayes, and David Lagana.
Would they let them... Or would Vince even think about letting them write Raw and get rid of Gerwitz? I mean, maybe keep him around for a little bit, but I mean, if you watch Raw and then you watch SmackDown, I mean, you gotta see. Gerwitz
should be doing promos for guys because he actually can be good at that. Sometimes he gets a little too corny and too comedic. I mean, like that thing with Booker where that segment with Booker T and Eric never ended. But
you're writing comedy for guys that are funny. Comedy for Kane is a total disaster.
Oh, yeah, you're right. But he should be doing some of that. But as far as writing a television show, I'm not impressed with Gewurz.
Right.
Now, as far as will they, it's possible. I mean,
I think if things get bad enough on Raw, that's what's going to happen.
It very well could happen.
I don't know if that's going to be good or bad for Heyman. I mean, if he totally turns it around, that's a good thing. But if he doesn't,
yeah. But you know what? I think
it's all his fault.
I do think it's better though that he can focus on one show a week because once you start focusing on 2 shows a week,
you get burned out.
You get burned out twice as fast. And I like it better this way, except that I got to watch Raw every Monday, and so I don't.
Can't he just be in charge of one show and then be a consultant for the other show where he just kind of looks it over and goes, "Oh, wait, hold on a second."
Yeah, but that's Vince. That's Vince's job.
Vince needs to retire.
Yeah, but one of the problems with the creative process is that Vince has to approve everything before it goes on the air.
Filtering, yeah.
Yeah, and Vince has so much on his plate that does not include the creative process. So it just makes it impossible to do anything more than a week ahead. And I mean
I wish Vince just trusted somebody enough where he would only filter one show and let someone else filter the other one. That way you'd at least it'd be more...
Yeah, but the person he would trust would be...
That's one thing, but still, you'd at least have 2 shows that when you watched them on TV, you knew that they were different for reasons other than the talent and the writing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I mean, that's the idea.
That like a Vince McMahon show.
At least, though, there really is a difference between the 2 shows now.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the wrestling show and there's the lousy show.
That's not the best.
I know it's not exactly what they wanted when they made
ideal.
When they made the extension, but that's what turned out. Yeah. Anything else, Jonathan?
Yeah, my other question was, with Jeff Hardy getting squashed on Raw this past week by the Big Slow, was that punishment for him getting blown up in that match the previous week in a couple minutes where he was just real sloppy?
It was punishment for us for criticizing him so much, for criticizing that product. No, really, when I was watching it, I believed that it was punishment. No one has told me that, though. That was just...
Yeah. I just assumed, I mean, I didn't think they were trying to put the big shit. Well, I guess Jeff Hardy's not like that over, but he is with some...
But they would, that was punishment, though. I mean, if you watch that match, it was just so incredibly horrible, and just the way, like, he kicked out of his finish, and just... I mean, there was a message being sent there. And, Jeff Hardy...
The problem, though, is that I don't think Jeff Hardy cares that he got squashed by the Big Show. And all it does is you took a guy that was a main eventer 3 weeks ago, and you make him look like the biggest jobber on the entire show, just because he was late.
But they do. I mean, like, look at, like, tests and things like that. When
I know they do it, but it's so stupid.
I know, because what ends up hurting themselves, not the guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. All right. Yeah, just, like, let him rest and get his act together. Let's go to Danny in Fitchburg, Massachusetts. By the way, real quick, we have a couple of lines open at 1-800-878-PLAY, so if you want to hop on board, this is a real good time. Okay, Danny, what's going on?
Hey, what's going on, guys? I just want to get your thoughts on the upcoming New Japan pay-per-view.
Do you mean the Tokyo Dome?
Huh?
The Tokyo Dome on the 14th? Because it's not a pay-per-view, that's a TV show.
Okay, yeah. That.
But I think it looks absolutely horrendous, horrible. I'm not looking forward to it, and it's going to be, on paper, one of the worst Tokyo Domes ever.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on Sho Funaki being allowed to work the Michinoku Pro Show that's coming up?
I wasn't actually even aware that he was, but...
As long as he can review on SmackDown, I'm fine. I love that character.
It's all right. Yeah, I do too. You know what's funny? New Japan has a guy, and I don't know his name, who's doing the interviews now, and he actually does the Sho Funaki character, although I'm not even sure he even knows it when he interviews China, and it's like the exact same thing. And she just, treats him so bad. I just wanted to kill that Joni Lauer. Every time I watch that she what can I say? Joni Lauer. She's made more money with no talent than anyone except for Kevin Nash.
And actually, it may be worse now that
No, because Kevin Nash is still making $14,000 a week.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. Anything else, Danny?
No, that's about it.
Okay, we're going to go to Alan in Deerfield Beach. Alan, what's happening?
How's it going?
Going good.
What's going on with Scott Steiner?
Scott Steiner is wrestling a show on the 29th, is it, in Northeast? I forget the city.
Yeah, I got two questions. One pertaining to Scott Steiner. Wanted to ask you, I hear a lot of rumors, and I even saw a shoot interview. He has a really volatile temper. Bring him into the locker room. Don't you think that it's a bad idea if they brought him into WWE?
I was actually surprised he was there.
Where?
At the WWE show.
No, he's not. But I said if they do.
I mean, I could see them giving him a tryout. The problem, everyone has a problem with Scott is his injury situation. It's not so much his temper. Concerned, Scott. Scott.
Are we talking about Scott Steiner?
Yeah.
I'm not talking about bringing in Conan.
No, yeah, Conan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. With Scott, they were real happy when Scott did that job for Booker T on the last Nitro. So it's kind of like it was a clean slate for them. Because originally, when I was talking to people there about like who they wanted and who they didn't want, Scott Steiner was definitely on the list, and this was before any injury problems that they knew about, on the list of people they didn't want. After he did that job, it was like they were very interested in Scott Steiner, but, they wanted him healthy, and, there's a question of how healthy he is. He works in Japan. He hasn't looked good in Japan, and when the shows are over, he's in a lot of pain.
And as far as backstage, Scott Steiner, he's going to be a pro when he's required to be a pro. He was required to be a pro in WCW, so he beat people up and got the world title. So
yeah, and they never punished him except, sending him home on the 4th of July weekend with pay.
Yeah, yep.
And the other question is, it's been long debated and stuff, and with Heenan's book about Hogan and him.
Oh, God, not this again. Come on, Alan.
It was never a problem, right?
Please. Oh, God. Let's go to Andrew. Andrew, what's going on?
Hey, guys. How's it going?
Going pretty good.
Cool. All right, I had a question about these two world championships that we've got right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, do you think that's more of a political thing that it even happened?
Yeah, I think that this is what I think. I think that Triple H knew that he was in line to do a job on a pay-per-view for Brock Lesnar. It's a really clever way of getting out of it, plus a championship for himself, getting a TV show to build around himself, because Brock Lesnar won't be on the show. And I think that, he went to Stephanie with those ideas, and, he controls Stephanie's line of thought a lot.
It just
seems... Yeah, but I think that eventually they were going to have two belts anyway. You know what I mean? If they're really going to be separate,
Yeah, but I think the idea of having the champion go on both shows is a good idea because it makes the championship something that's really important rather than diluted. Because you get these two belts. Now neither title really means that much.
I mean, if they're really going to separate it though, then they need two belts.
They're never going to separate it. They can't because it's all. If they were going to separate it, they need to do different initials for one of the shows.
That's true.
You know, and they need
part of it that was insulting. I think is that they just gave it to him. You know, if they had a tournament, it might be seen as more legitimate than it is.
I think that was just a bad idea of trying to get some heat.
Yeah, it was one of those.
I mean, he could have just won a tournament that night, and it would have been the same thing. But they figured, just give this guy the belt, and it'll make people hate him more. But it was the wrong kind of heat.
It was the wrong kind of heat, and also it just made, because no one cares about that belt. No one treats it seriously. I mean, maybe they will in a year, but, certainly not right now.
If anything, they would have treated it more seriously if they would actually had a tournament.
Yeah, they would have. It was just it's a bad idea anyway. I mean, how can you spend all summer building up the credibility of the one belt to where finally at SummerSlam for the first time in a year or so really meant something. And then, like a week later, you dilute it, and then you say a belt is so important. We're going to hand this guy a belt, and it's supposed to be equal to the one that we've been building up all year.
Maybe that was part of Hunter's plan was, talk about just hand me the belt and it'll get heat. But in the back of his mind, he was thinking, okay, no one's going to buy this, and I'm going to have to beat everybody to make this mean something.
But also, he doesn't have to ever wrestle Brock.
That's right.
At least on television, or because I know he worked with him at the house show.
What a smart man.
He is a smart. Hey.
Actually.
Yes, go ahead.
They feel it's going to be a big unification match between somewhere down the line.
I'm sure that at some point, someday, yes. I don't think that it's anything that's planned right now. But, I mean, we did the unification in December, and it's too soon to do. I believe the least bought pay-per-view the WWE has had up to that point in years. So
think about that.
So the unification gimmick, it's not something that sells today, unfortunately, because I thought...
Well, I think the unification thing would have sold if it hadn't been such a disaster of an invasion.
Oh, well, what? Because the invasion
was like, okay, yes, we're going to unify this title that none of you care about that we've buried for 6 months. I can see why nobody would care.
Yeah, well, you're right.
That belt means something. I think it'd been totally different.
Yeah, you're right about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks a lot, guys.
Okay, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. Okay, we're going to go ahead to a break right now. You're listening to the Wrestling Observer Live on the Sports Byline USA Radio Network. Observer Newsletter with Brian Alvarez of Figure 4 Weekly. We're going to also be having Devon Storm up in our second hour. We're going to be here for 2 hours each and every Sunday night here on Sports Byline USA. And speaking of the UFC, Brian, what are your thoughts on the match in Shamrock and Tito Ortiz in November?
Well, all I have to say is we usually get a lot of friends together to watch UFC, and I called a bunch of my friends, and I swear the first thing that everybody asked was, is this Ken versus Tito? And I go, no, that's next month. And then they were not interested. I
sensed probably the least amount of interest in Friday's UFC. Well, my friends pretty much know what's going on, but as far as like what the show was and everything like that. But I mean, when I go to the gym, I mean that's the one thing that people are always asking me about that fight. Ken and Tito and what's going to happen. And
it's about creating personalities, and they've done a hell of a job with those too. So.
Yeah, I mean, look, like Randy Couture is a much more successful UFC fighter than Ken Shamrock ever was, but he'll never sell the tickets. And that's people, a lot of martial arts fans, because they don't have the pro wrestling background, don't understand what this is all about. And the return of Ken Shamrock was the greatest move that Zuffa made.
Yeah.
Because they are going to have a big buy rate. There is curiosity come time for this next fight, and I don't know. Tito,
I predict Ken, by the way.
Do you really? Tell me why.
I say that right now.
Tell me why.
I say that why because he survived Don Fry, A, and B, I just think that Tito, coming off a knee injury, a torn ACL, is just not going to be able to do it. I really do.
If Tito cannot take Ken down, I think that Ken can win. But Tito's taking everyone down now. You're right. The knee injury is a factor.
I think that's the biggest factor of anything. I mean, look at wrestlers who tear their ACL and they're out forever.
Yeah.
And they come back, and the reason they come back when they do is because it's fake and they're not going to get killed in there. They can avoid the knee.
And Ken's going to be a shark for that knee.
Even if they get to the ground, he can, that knee's going to be right there just with a big bullseye on it.
Yeah, and the other thing with Ken, when you talk about survive Don Fry, the bottom line is that anyone but Don Fry in that match, they would have submitted in that third round. Because, Don had his knee torn, he had his ankle torn, and he just was going to, he knew he was ahead on the fight, and he was going to survive. He wasn't going to tap. He wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. But somebody else, if we got it a little bit earlier, would have been the end. Anyway, we have got to head to our hourly break for the news. We're going to come back with lots more. We're going to be taking all of your phone calls, so you can join in at 1-800-878-PLAY as soon as somebody hangs up, because we actually have all of our lines lit right now. We'll see ya. Listen to Wrestling Observer Live on the Sports Byline Radio Network.
Let's get it on.
Okay, welcome to the second hour here on Wrestling Observer Live. I'm Dave Meltzer, editor of the Wrestling Observer newsletter. With Brian Alvarez of Figure 4 Weekly, we're here for 2 hours every night from 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time, 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific Time on our Sports Byline USA affiliates all over the United States, as well as Armed Forces Radio and Sirius satellite radio. So we're heard everywhere. We do have one line open at 1-800-878-PLAY, so you can jump on that. Before we get to the lines, I want to talk to you about NWA TNA, because we haven't talked about them in a couple of weeks. And the response that we've gotten to the shows, it's not that it's been good or bad. It was kind of in the middle for the last show, but the number of responses has been really sad.
Yeah. I mean, one of the
number of responses has been really sad.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I was thinking about this on Wednesday was they were talking for so long about one of the strengths of pay-per-view was they're actually exactly like a TV show, and that they have to hold stuff off for the next week. And I was watching this show, and it's like every show is self-contained, and the only thing they do is have Don West do his wacky promo at the end of the show.
Which is actually one of my favorite parts of every show.
It actually is. But he's talking about these matches, and the only reason that we have to see them is we know who's going to be in the matches, and we know that they work really hard. And it's not like they use one show to build up to another show, to build up to another show, and give you reason to tune in. Instead, it's like, well, they figure that they've got a certain number of fans who are going to tune in every week, and this is, they're not trying to build anything new out of it. And, I just watch it, and it's like, well, I guess TNA's on next week. I got to write about it for the newsletter, so I'll watch it. But if I did not have to write about it, I really would have no desire to buy the shows.
No, I wouldn't anymore either. I don't think that they're, just based on the response that we get, I think they're losing viewers every week.
Yeah, but I mean, they would have lost me by now, and I was watching, it wasn't love the shows or anything, but I think I probably would have bought the first 3 or 4 before they got, the dubs showed up.
Yeah. I mean, I liked a lot of the early stuff. I liked, the ladder match a couple of weeks ago was tremendous. I mean, that was certainly worth seeing. But they haven't really been able to make stars, but you can't, but then again, you can't make stars in the Nashville Fairgrounds without television.
Yeah. So. And another thing is even, the really great matches, I've almost become numb to them, because I see the same thing every single week, and it's almost like they're giving too much on pay-per-view, like that's their strength, but in reality it's almost becoming their weakness.
Anyway, we've got to head to a break right now. We're going to be back with your phone calls right after this. You're listening to Wrestling Observer Live. Welcome back to Wrestling Observer Live. I'm Dave Meltzer, editor of the Wrestling Observer newsletter, with Brian Alvarez of Figure 4 Weekly. We got a ton of calls to get to before we get to Devon Storm in just a couple minutes, so I want to roll through these.
I got to make one more comment real quick about TNA.
Okay.
I've always thought that Mike Tenay was doing a very good job on, the commentary on the pay-per-view and everything, but it was not until this past Wednesday that I suddenly realized that he is the glue that holds an entire show together, because at the very beginning they had this brawl with Siaki and Jerry Lynn, and I had no idea why they were fighting. Everything to me, and all of a sudden it hit me like, oh my God, if it were not for Mike Tenay, I would know nothing about anything that's happening on this show.
You know what, though? That brawl meant nothing for the rest of the show. I mean,
well, that's true, it did.
I understand why as far as last week's show.
Yeah.
But it's two guys doing that generic brawl that they always do for no reason backstage with no, what are these two guys, they get to this corner and nobody's around. Let's do our brawl. The most embarrassing thing, though, on the TNA show last week was when Mike Tenay goes, oh, my God, we got a problem at the back.
And it's Red walking in and nothing's happening. And then he was
jumped by what was it, Killings, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's psychic.
I guess that's what it was. Okay.
That's why he's so great.
All right, let's go to Jeff in Phoenix. Jeff, how are you?
What's going on, guys?
Not too much.
Listen, I've been watching wrestling for 25 years, and I bought one TNA show. I think it was like the fourth or fifth one with a lot of the dubs in there.
Oh, you picked the wrong show.
Yeah, and I've never bought it again. And, you know, I mean, I guess that's the way that pay-per-view wrestling goes. Quickly, though, two things. One humorous, one not so humorous. The first thing I noticed when Bischoff was out there to hand the belt to Hunter, and Hunter came out in his, in his new garb that looks, also classy and everything, was how much facial hair can camouflage elephantitis of the nose. I mean, the fact that he's shaved and he has absolutely no facial hair now, that nose just seems 5 times as large.
You know, that's true, because I always thought that his forehead was so big that his nose shrunk. But it turned out it was his beard.
It's his beard. You gotta grow that beard back, man, because I tell you, when he came out, I was like, geez, what happened? Did he shoot it right into the nose? So anyway, listen, seriously, I've been, like I said, I've been following wrestling for 25 years, and I have never really gotten upset over a match before because I know it's all been worked and everything. But I almost got physically ill actually after watching that Undertaker Lesnar finish. And I really, and I'm sure you guys have covered this earlier in the show. I missed the first part of the show. What were your feelings on that? I mean, I couldn't.
As outraged as everybody else was, but I mean, I was outraged at the weakness of it. In that, when that referee signaled for a bell, I was just like, oh God. I mean, if you're going to do it, at least do it good. And it was, it just wasn't a very exciting reason for a DDQ, because both those guys were just...
Well, for 20 minutes, there was no way they could even be exciting if they were told to,
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that...
Well, I mean, Hogan went down, Rock went down. Listen, Undertaker...
Undertaker has to go down on the next show. The problem is that there was a next show and they had nobody else ready and they were going to shows. So Undertaker had to look strong. Even if he was going to lose by a fluke, he had to look real match. They couldn't do the Hogan thing and they couldn't do the Rock thing because they were coming back with a rematch right away.
So you're saying that it was because of the next show that they had no opponent for him that they had to make him look okay. So
that's right because
the theory.
The rematch was planned. Now the way they did that finish didn't work. Now if they come back on the next show, okay, and he doesn't beat him, I mean Undertaker can get a lot of offense, but if he doesn't beat him clean when that show is over, then we'll just say whatever we can say about Undertaker because I'm sure that'll be the finish that they just.
Isn't that what everybody said before they faced the first time?
Before
beat him clean, then.
But they had no other contenders ready, unfortunately.
Well, and this is the last comment. I'll let you guys get to your other callers, but I'm constantly amazed, and I posted this on night. Constantly amazed how such stupid idiots can be involved in a multi-million-dollar company.
We're not.
Seriously. How can a company have that much money and that much power behind it, even though it's shrinking, daily, and have that many idiots involved in it? It just doesn't make any sense to me.
I don't actually know. I mean, I don't know how many of them are idiots.
Well, actually, the problem with WWF is there only needs to be one idiot, and that's Vince.
But I don't think Vince is an idiot. I think,
I'm just giving I'm just telling.
I mean, if Vince was an idiot, it would be really bad. But I wouldn't call. I don't know if there's anyone I would call an idiot there. But there are people.
Mistakes. There are stupid mistakes.
Vince is making a ton of mistakes, and I think. But a lot of them were made. A lot of them were made last year, and then a lot of them were made by. Going through with this brand extension with the idea of Steve Austin and Rock anchoring the two shows, and then they were both gone.
Yep.
And, the inability. I mean, I don't know if they should drop the extension or not. I mean, I kind of think that I would do it differently, where I would keep.
Everybody would do it differently than what they're doing it right
now. Yeah, well, listen, everyone would have done last year differently, and I think that very few could have done it as bad.
Well, just ask Brian about the invasion, right?
No.
You don't have to ask Brian. I mean, I lived through that thing, too, and it was. I mean, I just keep thinking back about, that whole thing of they had the $1 million angle handed to them and somehow
it off so well.
Yeah, I know the multi-million-dollar angle and Kevin Dunn and Vincent McMahon start talking about brand building and we built this WWE brand and we can't let this WWE brand go bad and it's just like it's like no, you're trying to create a wrestling feud and when
when WWF changed to WWE, that meant nothing. When Jim Crockett Promotions was sold to Ted Turner, and the name eventually, the public name changed from NWA to WCW. I don't want to hear from historians about anything. I'm just saying the public name of the fans changed. It meant nothing as far as the popularity or anything like that. The brand name in wrestling, the WWF brand and WWE brand means a little bit, okay, or maybe even a feud of WWF and WCW. WWF could sell, and it would not hurt the brand. It would help the brand because business would go up. So anyway.
At least we have Kurt Angle.
Kurt Angle's great. Anyway, we got to get going, okay, Jeff?
Talk to you later.
Well, let's just put it that way then. You could have a million smart people in the company, and if there's one guy at the top making bad decisions, then it's all downhill.
Yeah. And also making rash decisions. I mean, like the whole long-term decision. I mean, remember, the whole story about what they were going to do with splitting the brands with WWF and WCW. And the one show in Tacoma, and Vince was just like, that's it.
Yep.
Let's go to Thomas. Thomas.
Hey, guys.
Hey.
A few quick questions.
Yes.
How much money do you think Nicole Bass will get from her lawsuit?
I'm not following close enough. I mean, all I know is that the lawyers that the WWE has are very scary lawyers, and I don't like her chances. But go for it. I don't know. I don't think she's doing.
They have her admitting that she lied about her income, and that the settlement that she's asking for is really high.
Right.
When she's doing stuff like that, that's not a good sign.
I don't think she's doing so well from what I read in the newspapers.
Another question: is it true Stasiak and Awesome are no longer with the WWE?
Yeah, they were let go. I think it was Friday, Thursday or Friday.
What's I don't understand
and Horace Hogan as well.
You can you explain the mindset of somebody like, let's say, on one spectrum you got Stasiak, who has a tremendous and given, why doesn't it enter his mind if I could just get some wrestling skills, I could, actually, you know what? And then you have somebody like Awesome, who I guess, lets himself, let his physique go. I guess, he just accepted his lot in life, and I just don't understand the mindset of somebody. I mean, I keep going back to like Austin, who has the mindset, you give me the ball and I'll run with it, and I just don't understand it.
Talking to people that work with Stasiak, they've said that they've tried to give him all the advice in the world, and he doesn't get it.
Right.
So I don't think it was something where he didn't want to get better or anything like that. I just think he was a guy that just never is going to have it.
Obviously, they thought like Stasiak every extra chance.
Yeah.
It's like what's his name? The guy. Remember the guy in Tough Enough? What was his name? Jake.
The blonde dude.
Jake.
Yeah.
Jake. I mean, they gave him.
Yeah, he right out said that he wasn't a fast learner.
Yeah. I mean, they gave him every opportunity in the world, and then here's the perfect example. You don't hear about Jake running around on these shows like all those other guys that are on that Tough Enough show, and that tells you right there that them not picking Jake was the right move.
Right. One final question: is Paul Heyman out of his financial woes with ECW? Like, other lawsuits and stuff. Is he out of debt?
I don't know I think he declared personal bankruptcy, but he's making a good salary now, so I don't think he's in financial woes right now. The ECW company is, but I think Paul's doing all right.
Cool. All right. Love your newsletters, and Brian, please more Frank Gotch.
Oh, okay.
Take care.
Frank Gotch how old is Frank now? 110, 120? What?
He's getting on in years.
Yeah.
My grandma finally discovered that he was not currently alive.
Come on.
I swear it took her many weeks. I kayfabed her, too.
He's 120, he's 2 years old. Anyway, we're going to be talking to Devon Storm in just a couple of minutes, but we also have a full bank of phone calls. You can join us at 1-800-878-PLAY, and we'll be back right after this commercial break. You're listening to the Wrestling Observer Live on the Sports Byline USA Radio Network. Okay, welcome back to Wrestling Observer Live. I'm Dave Meltzer, editor of the Wrestling Observer newsletter, with Brian Alvarez of Figure 4 Weekly, and we're going to have Chris Ford, Devon Storm up in just a second. I want to remind everyone that if you're interested in the Wrestling Observer newsletter, which I put out every week, or Figure 4 Weekly that Brian puts out every week, you can go to www.wrestlingobserver.com. We also have updated news throughout the day, every single day, lots of features up on the website, and info on how to get those publications. And Wrestling Observer and probably the most detailed inside look at pro wrestling that you're going to be finding anywhere, and very entertaining reads. Hopefully mine is. I know Brian's is. So anyway, is Chris up?
Hey, Dave, what's going on, man?
Hey, Chris, how are you?
Good.
One of the things, we were talking about having you on the show about just a couple of weeks ago, and then as tragedy would have it, you were just in the last match of Flyboy Rocco Rock, Ted Petty, who, you know, you've known for since you were a teenager. And why don't you tell us a little bit about the match and just, you know, about Ted Petty?
Okay, well, actually, the first time I ever seen Ted Petty was as a wrestling fan. Growing up, I was always a huge fan watching WWF, WCW. But as far as my knowledge, I don't know a lot about the independent scene or anything like that. Then I believe it was my sophomore year of high school, a friend of mine had tickets to a local independent show in town. He said, "You want to check this out?" And I really didn't recognize maybe a lot of the names on the card, except maybe for a few. I knew Mike Sharp from TV. I think Afo or Sika. I'm not sure which one was on the card, but outside of that, I didn't really know any of the names. But it was a free seat and it was pro wrestling, so I said, "Screw it, let's go and let's see it. You know, it might be fun." First match, this guy came out dressed with a mask, a cheetah mask, leopard print tights, and at that time, it was a time where, you know, you really never saw the aerial style that much here. You never saw salts and dives to the floor all that much, and just one move after the other. You know, this guy just amazed the crowd. And I was seeing stuff I'd never seen on the TV before, and you know, being just a regular fan, not knowing what the business part was like, I was looking at my friends saying, "Why isn't this guy on the TV? He's amazing." You know what I mean? He was showing us stuff that, you know, I'd never seen before, and just move after move inside the ring. And then at that time, I'd never seen somebody run across the ring, jump over the top rope, do a front flip, and land on the floor, and that just totally floored me. And as I wrote in the column, you know, before, I'd always wanted to be a pro wrestler, but after I saw this guy, I not only wanted to wrestle, I wanted to wrestle just like him. The fact that he wasn't huge, that time, most wrestlers were giant, muscle-bound guys. The fact that he was in great shape, but he was more normal size, it actually gave me hope and made me believe that I could accomplish that. A few years went by. I attended pro wrestling school and started working the independents. Trained a lot with the guy that everybody knows now as Hugh Morris, a guy that I had met in the gym while I was in high school. And he's sort of the guy that taught me the aerial style, and, you know, I owe a lot to him. You know, any place that I've gone, he was actually the guy that got in the ring with me and taught me how to do that stuff. The first time they called me down to WCW, you know, they wanted me to do a Nitro, and where I would work with Conan, and I did a few of the Orlando tapings, and I met Teddy on a personal basis through Hugh. And he was just a real down-to-earth guy, and he was always willing to give advice. And I was a brand-new green kid. I didn't know anything whatsoever, and he really took his time. He didn't look down on me at all, and he treated me like one of the guys. And him, Hugh, and Johnny Grunch at that time, they really looked out for me. And I wrote about it in a column also. During that trip, I was doing matches at the Orlando studios, and they wanted me to go out there with Chris Kanyon, and I was told to go out there and just do all my wild stuff. I wanted to do a vignette for TV and all this other stuff, and somewhere in the match, which made no sense, by the way, it was just a spot fest, because they were just trying to get stuff for a vignette. So Kanyon ended up going out to the floor, and I ended up going up on the top turnbuckle, my back to him, and I cut a moonsault from the top rope to the floor. Unfortunately, our spacing where he was on the floor, where I came down up top, was off, and my shins hit him on the top of his shoulder, you know, more where his trap hit, and he got a stinger in his arm, and I actually think he blew his shoulder out. And as you know, Dave, that's not the best first impression to make when you're in a new company, is take out one of the guys that everybody likes. So, you know, I went back to the hotel with Hugh, you know, worrying about what was going to happen to me, if I would ever be used. You know, it had been my goal to make it to a big company since I was a kid, and I felt like I totally just flushed the whole thing down the toilet. You know, I really was distraught, and I was absolutely I was ready to quit the business and just give up all hope. And, you know, I was absolutely devastated. There was no other way to put it. I was absolutely devastated. Teddy, you know, he took me under his wing, and he would talk to me. Hugh and Johnny and everybody, they were all trying to, you know, make me feel better. Didn't work that well, and then Ted, he took it upon himself to grab the rent-a-car. He took me out, just me and him, bought me dinner, and he spoke to me about a good hour and a half, and, you know, he tried to calm me down, everything in perspective, assure me that I had a lot of time in front of me, and that I had good good athletic ability, and that one day, I would, I'd make it somewhere. And, that's the time when, everybody's down in Orlando, Florida. They're at a nice hotel. There's all kinds of stuff going on. There's a party wherever you look. There's all kinds of clubs and bars around. And, the guys were probably all out having a great time. And Ted Petty took his time to spend with some green kid that he didn't know from Adam. It was the first time he ever met him. And he saw somebody was upset, and instead of going out and having fun, he took time out of his own personal schedule, and he gave me a good talk there. And I really feel had it for that talk, I may have quit wrestling and just altogether given up. And there were so many stories that I could have written about Teddy on the internet, but I feel that was the one thing that really showed what kind of a person he was. He didn't know me from anybody. It was the first time he'd ever met me. From a lot of the other guys' eyes, I went out there, I was given an opportunity, and I screwed it up by hurting somebody. And, he could have totally written me off. I'll let this kid hang out in his hotel room and go out and have fun with the boys. And he chose to take me out, buy me a meal, and really put things in perspective. And I'll never forget that. And, God bless. I may have quit, and I may have never gotten to experience all the things that I've got to experience through this business.
When, what was the funeral? You were at the funeral on Tuesday, weren't you?
I was at the wake. I had actually started a new job, and I was able to get out early on Tuesday night for the wake. However, I was not able to get time off the next day for the funeral itself. Okay.
Now, what was it like for you on Saturday of last week? Maybe just retrace kind of like how that day went, because you wrestled him and then you went to the turnpike with him, and then you got the news a couple of hours later.
It was very surreal. We had both wrestled that match, and before we went out there, I said to Teddy, and in the back of my head, ever since I saw him wrestle as the Cheetah Kid, I had always wanted to have a singles match with him. I had a few tag matches with him.
So that was actually your first single match ever with him?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I had worked with him in a tag match in WCW with Ace, my partner Ace Darling, and then we also worked in independent match for Tony Rumble. Me and Ace against him and Johnny Grunge years back, but I had never got to be one-on-one with him in the ring. And, it was just a real honor and privilege to finally get to do this. For me, myself, I was thinking my whole time, this was the first guy I'd ever seen on an independent show, a guy that I really modeled myself out after. The guy, when I saw him wrestle, he made me want to be just like him. Had to be 12, 13 years later, I'm finally getting to wrestle with him one-on-one in the ring. And, and through that time, I had gone from being a fan to actually being one of his peers, and that alone was an honor itself. And I was talking with him in the back. I go, Teddy, what do you want to do tonight? Like, I know you have a double shot, and I have a double shot, but mine's a lot closer than yours. So whatever you want to do, we'll go out there and do. And he said, the business really hasn't been a lot of fun. He goes, let's just go out there and have fun for a change. Let's go out there, let's entertain people. He goes, let's just have fun. And and that's always what I'm about. I enjoy with the business of wrestling. I've made some money doing it, but more than anything else, I love going out there and performing, having a good time. And that night, I had a fantastic time with Teddy. We went out there with a packed house, a lot of kids, so they bid on everything we did. We really didn't do anything out of the ordinary. We weren't lazy, but we worked hard, but we worked safe and good. And we both hopped on the turnpike. He wasn't sure how to get back to the turnpike from Jersey City, so he followed me. And Elizabeth, which was where my second shot of the night was about maybe 10-15 minutes away off of exit 13, and Teddy had to go a little bit further south, which is exit 3, which is down in Philly. So he followed me, and once we got on the turnpike, we each went our ways, and I went to a second. I wrestled there, and the show got out at about 11:15 or so. I showered up, changed, and as I was walking out, as I always do, I check my phone, and I see I have like 3-4 messages on it. And I said, that's weird, it's late on Saturday night. I was wondering who the hell was calling me. And I get the first one. It said, give me a call back. Teddy had a heart attack, I heard. Do you know anything about this? And that was kind of strange, because Teddy was great in the ring. He didn't miss a beat. He was fantastic. And then I get another message, and it just floored me. It said, Devon, give me a call back. I heard that Teddy died. Right there, I just froze. It was almost unreal. You know, I was just with him. We just went out there and had a match together. We both left the building together, and he was following me. And
Chris, can you hold up because we have to hit your commercial break, okay?
Sure.
Okay, we'll be back with Chris Ford right after this. You're listening to Wrestling Observer Live on the Sports Byline USA Radio Network. Okay, welcome back to Wrestling Observer Live. I'm Dave Meltzer, editor of the Wrestling Observer Newsletter, with Brian Alvarez, a Figure 4 Weekly, and our guest tonight, Devon Storm, Chris Ford. And we were talking a little bit about Ted Petty, and right when we hit the break, you were at Block 1130 last Saturday night when you, I guess, first heard from, Georgianne Macropolis that Teddy had died.
Yeah, my second show had ended. I had hopped in the shower. You know, I was getting ready to leave, and I just checked my voicemail, and there was Georgie was on the phone. She goes, Devon, give me a call back. I heard that Teddy had a heart attack. You know, that was kind of weird. And then the second one, she goes, I checked the second voicemail. Says, give me a call back. I hear that Teddy died. And that right there, it was so surreal. It was like this can't be happening. I was just with the guy. He was fine. He was fantastic in the ring. We had a great time. We had just hopped in our cars and left. It just didn't seem real. So I called around, and I found out from a few people that had heard the same story, and I guess it was then that I found out, you know, I really thought that, yeah, this had really happened, but at the same time it didn't hit me yet. It was still kind of, you know, it was very surreal, and that night I hung out with Ace and, you know, with the Wall Mouse, with my girlfriend Dina, and a few of the other guys. And like, if you ask any of the boys at all, like it's very rare you ever see me pick up any alcohol, no beverage at all. And we just started talking about the times that we worked with him, myself and Ace, and you know, just seeing him at just the advice that he would give us and stuff. And it really started to sink in, and it started to hurt. And you know, it's very rare. I had to have a few drinks with Ace, and we talked about, you know, Teddy. I spoke about him with, you know, Simon Diamond, you know, the Wallace, and my girlfriend was there, and like all ended support. The next day was kind of weird still, but I went about my business that I had to do, but I had a lot of feelings building up inside, you know, feeling that it was his last match. Of course, anyone else would think. I was thinking if there was anything in the match that might have hurt him or something like that, and I kept replaying it in my mind, and it was just a basic, easy match, and time. But of course, it's the first thing you would think, you know. But and then it really started to hit more that Teddy was gone, and I was his last match. You know, the guy that really inspired me to believe that I could be a pro wrestler, and the guy that I really modeled a lot of my style after. I had the last match possibly with him, and he was gone, and it was just really rough at that point in time.
Well, you know, we were talking earlier in the week, and you know, one of the things you've gone through, you know, you were in WCW, the thing went down. Mm-hmm. How long before WCW went down? I mean, what were your thoughts? Because now, I mean, you have a regular job as a physio, and a lot of the ex-WCW.
And he was gone, and it was just really rough at that point in time.
Well, you know, we were talking earlier in the week, and you know, one of the things you've gone through, you know, you were in WCW, the thing went down. Mm-hmm. How long before WCW went down? I mean, what were your thoughts? Because now, I mean, you have a regular job as a physio, and a lot of the ex-WCW wrestlers, a lot of them don't, you know, and they're still, I'm not sure, you know, I mean, some of them can make money, you know, full-time independent, you know, a couple of them have gotten, you know, gigs in other places, but for those guys, at what point did you go and say, you know, I've got to get another job, and wrestling, whatever the wrestling I do independently on the weekend is going to be for fun, and it's not going to be for my livelihood?
Well, what most people don't know is when I was still under contract with WCW, the days when I wasn't touring on the road, I worked per diem at a local local hospital here. When I graduated school, I worked at a hospital close to home here for close to about a year until I was signed by WCW. When I left, I had a good relationship with the establishment. And physical therapy is a field, especially in a hospital, that when the patient cases get high, you usually call out to an agency for somebody to fill in at the last minute and pick up some of the cases so that they could handle the load. When I was still working for WCW, when I was at home, it was very frequent they would call me and say, Chris, we have a high patient load today. We can't handle them. You want to come in for the day? And I would actually get a lot of work that way. When WCW when they folded up, before they folded up, I had a lot of hopes of trying to land a spot with WWF. So right away, I didn't grab a full-time job. There's a lot of work in the physical therapy field under the per diem, type of work where people will call you for that day. And I was basically working a full-time job under per diem status for, since I got released. And I had aspirations of hopefully trying to make it there. WWF had a few dark matches. Didn't pan out the way I wanted to. And then the WWA tours popped up, and the fact that I was working per diem allowed me to take off, for the tours when I needed to. And then just this past spring, WWA didn't seem to be doing much. WWE now, as it's called, actually had no interest whatsoever. So I said, it's time to get a full-time deal here, get my benefits, and just keep wrestling on the weekends. Thank God I'm here on the East Coast where there's a lot of work. Like this past week, for example, I worked Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, which is very rare anywhere. But, the fact that between New York, Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, there's a lot of stuff going on here. So it was basically, close to the end of this past spring of 2002, that I said it's time to grab a full-time job and the weekend.
Why don't you talk a little bit about what happened with TNA, because there was a lot of talk about a column that you wrote about them, and whether or not you think that that kind of signaled the end of the relationship between you and them.
Well, I hope it hasn't, but basically what had happened was the TNA thing popped up, and I was real optimistic about that. Anytime there's more work going around, it's I thought it would be good for me as well as for everybody. The more work, the better. So I got a call to go down there to be part of the church deal. The church gimmick with Malice and James Mitchell and Flash and all that. And at that point in time, I was taking vacation time to fly down there on a Wednesday and come back on a Thursday. And my job was pretty cool with it at first. And then it got to the point when they put me with the church, it seemed like I would be coming back more often to be part of that. So I started to look for other work that may be able to accommodate my schedule. I started to look, and I found one facility in Saddlebrook, New Jersey, where I would be able to work long hours Monday, Tuesday, have Wednesday off, get into work late on Thursday, which would allow me to fly back in the morning and work long hours again on Friday. And, I was calling back into the office there to figure out what was going on, and, it seemed like this church thing was going to go on, so they told me that it may be a good idea to take this new job, and which would leave my Wednesdays open and come in late on Thursdays. So that was, I hadn't jumped at that job because I still had some vacation time to use up, but I had that option, and, that facility that had offered me the position with those hours, said they would give me some time to see what was my best option. So a few weeks go by, and I'm not on the TV, so I start calling down, they start calling back, and I find out that one of the reasons why I can't go down there is just the airfare from Newark Airport to Nashville is kind of expensive. So they asked me if I could fly to Atlanta, and I said sure. I'll drive up. It'll be tough, but if I have to fly there and drive up just to be a part of this show, just to be able to participate. That's not a problem whatsoever, you know, because I really wanted to be part of this new thing. I wanted to do whatever I could to make it happen. After that, there were some issues about, you know, the pay I was getting and everything else, which I really don't want to get into. You know, I've done that before, but I just want to go on record saying, you know, there was a lot of conversations back and forth to make an attempt to make it financially possible for me to get there and perform. And I was willing to make the sacrifices to get there and perform. You know, I'm always about having a great time and going out there and giving 100%. But we couldn't come to an agreement, so I figured, you know, that was it. Unfortunately, I had taken the new job, so that sort of, you know, put a monkey wrench in my plan. So now I had to wait for benefits to kick back in, because you have to be at a job for 3 months for that to kick in, and that whole deal that everybody knows about. You know, the procedures of getting a new job. So a few weeks later, I get an email from a friend saying that Wade Keller said that I'm not being brought back to TNA because I felt not to fit into the new church gimmick, and something to the effect of, I've been calling the office too much and annoying management or something to that effect. So I looked at that and I said, there has been a lot of conversations going on between me and TNA because of the job, and you're trying to find a way to get me down there. And I just thought that it wasn't coincidental that this popped up either. You know, during a period of time when I am calling to have some kind of report like this. So I figured someone got a half story, you know, some kind of office stooge let something out, and they called Wade Keller, and Wade Keller, instead of getting the story straight before he printed it, decided to print something that made me look professionally like a schmuck. So I took it upon myself to put my side of the story down, and as I was writing that, I had the friends that fed me the information said, do you really want to do something like that? You might make Wade mad, and he might write bad stuff about you. And at that point, I actually had to think about it, because my entire career, you know, I've done many interviews with you before, Dave. I'm very PC. I'm very soft-spoken. I always try to play the nice guy. And finally, I said, screw that. You know, I have another career. I make great money. I'm always going to have food on my table. I get a lot of independent work, and I'm not going to sit back and let somebody print crap about me. That's not true, you know. And even if I do make him angry, he could print whatever he likes. It's never going to affect me. I am untouchable as far as Wade Keller is concerned. He could print whatever he wants about me. I'm still going to have food on my table. I'm still going to work very often on the independents, and I'm still going to laugh at all the crap he writes. So
okay, we got to go ahead to a commercial break right now. We'll be back with Chris Ford right after this. You're listening to the Wrestling Observer Live on the Sports Byline USA Radio Network. Okay, welcome to our final segment here on Wrestling Observer Live on the Wrestling Observer Newsletter. We're here for 2 hours every Sunday night here on the Sports Byline USA Radio Network with Brian Alvarez of Figure 4 Weekly, and, of course, Chris Ford, Devon Storm, who's our guest. Since we're running low on time, we have a ton of calls to get through. One question each. We're going to start with Jack in Boston. Jack, what's up?
Hi, Dave, Brian, Chris, how's it going tonight?
Hey, Jack, what's going on, bro?
Great. I had a question, Chris, maybe you have some insight, I don't know if you've been following WWE TV, about the brand extension. Me and a friend have been talking about the split brands and the initial idea of eventually getting to run 2 pay-per-views if things got profitable. But the idea that came up was, why not run a SmackDown pay-per-view one month, followed by a Raw pay-per-view the other month, so that they can have maybe 2 months' worth to build some useful, not to say that they would, but just in theory, does that sound like a good idea? Because we realized that we hadn't heard of that ever talked about.
Well, I can tell you right now the reason that they're not doing it is because they don't think that they have the depth to where, I mean, if the buys were like through the roof every month, I think that they would think of doing that. But with the buys now being at the lowest point in years, I think that they're afraid that if they take half the stars off of each monthly pay-per-view, that it just, you know, the money loss would be too much. So I
think I suggested that a couple of weeks ago, actually.
Yeah. I could see it happening, but not right now. Business would have to be stronger.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Okay. You got any comments, Devin?
I actually, in theory, I think it's a great idea, because you would have more, but obviously, just like you said, right now you need as many stars as you can on the pay-per-views. You know, when I look at wrestling, you know, from a fan's point of view, you know, growing up, I used to love it when the storylines would establish a feud or, you know, a story between one wrestler and another over time, and it would finally climax down the road. You would be waiting for that climax to happen. But right now, you know, as you said, they need as many stars as they can on each and every tape.
You know, yeah, we're running low on time. One thing I want to ask you, you know, with you know, you've been a fan for years and years and years, like we all have. Don't you think that is exactly the one thing what you just said is that's missing, is that long build up to a match that most of the time when these matches come up, it's like, you know, I'm watching them and, you know, I'm enjoying them if they're good and they're not enjoying them if they're bad, but the anticipation isn't there like it used to be.
Exactly. Like, you know, as a fan, I remember watching WWF TV, and as you know, this is just one example that we actually have to wrap up right now. We're like totally out of time. Chris, I want to thank you very much for joining us tonight, and we're going to be here next Sunday at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific with Wrestling Observer Live. Brian, thanks very much. We'll see you all next week. You're listening to Wrestling Observer Live on the Sports Byline USA Radio Network.